It's a golden law of page layout. Nothing ever seems to be the size you need it to be on your page. Fortunately, there are a number of ways to scale graphics, text, and other page items in InDesign. I have my portfolio page open from the exercise files folder, and I'm going to jump to page 4 by pressing Command-J or Control-J on Windows, then typing 4 and hitting Enter or Return. Now on this page, this artwork just isn't the right size. I need to scale it up. The first way we'll do that is by clicking on it with the Selection tool and then choosing the Free Transform tool. The Free Transform tool lives in this group of tools in the Tool panel. Right now it's set to the Rotate tool, or the Rotation tool, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to choose the Free Transform tool. You can also get that by pressing the letter E when you're not editing text. The Free Transform tool is great because if I select it and then drag a side or a corner handle, it automatically scales it. Now we're seeing a background coloration problem here. That's just a screen redraw problem, and it goes away as soon as I let go of the mouse button. But we're also seeing another problem here. When I scaled this, it scaled it disproportionately. It got wider, kind of stretched it out, which I think this artist would not be very happy with. So instead, I'm going to undo that, Command-Z or Control-Z, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I drag. Come over to the corner handle and Shift drag, and now it scales it proportionally. It makes sure the height and width is always proportional. So that's pretty good, but I have to tell you, I actually don't usually use the Free Transform tool. Why? Because I just use the Selection tool, the black arrow tool. This tool lets me do exactly the same thing, except I have to remember to hold down one modifier key, the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows. That key tells the Selection tool to scale both the frame and what's inside the frame. So, Command or Control drag on this corner handle, or a side handle, will scale it again, but it scales it disproportionately, just like that Free Transform tool. So I'd better undo that, and instead Command-Shift or Control-Shift. That scales it proportionally. I really like that Command-Shift or Control-Shift trick. That is honestly what I use almost all the time when I'm scaling things. That said, there is one other technique which is pretty useful, and that's to scale up in the Control panel. Now up here in the Control panel, there are two scaling percentages, the width and the height. And next to them, there's a little link icon. When that's turned on, which it is by default, the height and the width will always scale proportionally. They'll scale together. But before I'm going to use either of those, I want to make sure that the reference point is set properly. That's the icon in the far left corner of the Control panel. And this tells InDesign what should anchor, what should not move, where everything else will scale around that point. Right now it's set to the center, and that's not right for this. I want the upper right corner to stay fixed. So I'll click on that. Now I'll come over here and replace that 100% with a different percentage, say 150%, and then I'll press Return or Enter. Now an interesting thing happened here. It did scale it up, but it still says 100%. What's going on there? Well, by default, when InDesign scales a frame, it always sets it back to 100%. Now, the image inside is not necessarily 100%. And remember, you can double-click on an image with the Selection tool, and that selects the image inside the frame. With the image selected, I can see in the Control panel that the image is scaled to 78%. Well, 78.070, etc. %, but you get the idea. But if I double-click on this again, it goes back to the frame, and I can see that is 100%. I'm going to undo that change because what I really want is for this image and this caption, and I'll select both of them, I want both of those together to be exactly 7 inches wide. I want to scale that up until they're 7 inches wide together. Now, you might think that you could go to the width field of the Control panel, this field right up here, and just type 7 inches, 7IN, and hit Enter. But that does not work at all. This actually resizes the frames, not scales them. If you look closely, you can see that this frame is actually now too big for this image. That's not what I wanted to happen. I wanted it to scale. So let's undo that and try a different technique. Instead of scaling in the width field, which doesn't really work, I'm going to go to the scale field, the horizontal scale field, and I'm going to change that 100% here to 7 inches. I'll just type 7IN, or you could type 7 double quote or whatever. Either way works. Now that's a little strange. I'm replacing a percentage with an absolute value. But it works, because when I hit Return or Enter, the whole thing gets scaled. So now I know that these two objects together make up exactly 7 inches wide, which I guess, according to that width field, is 504 pixels. I didn't know that. Of course, while you can scale your text and vector art like Illustrator art all you want, scaling bitmapped images, like this Photoshop image here, does have an effect on its quality. If you scale a bitmapped image up, its resolution goes down. Scale it down and the resolution goes up. It's just something to keep in mind when scaling objects on your page.